In the heart of a city's ceaseless rhythm, where lives intersected for fleeting moments, a tale of second chances and unearthed secrets was about to unfold. Could it happen to you? Could it happen to someone you know? Perhaps it already has. Take 5 more seconds and let me tell you a story. This healing narrative will linger in your mind long after it concludes. From what corner of the world are you listening, and what thoughts occupy your mind at this very moment? Hector Adams, a figure of quiet authority, sat stiffly on the subway bench. His impeccably tailored gray coat lay precisely folded across his lap, his polished shoes unyielding, even as the train swayed to the pulse of the tracks. The early evening crowd ebbed and flowed at each station, a restless tide of grocery bags, briefcases, and the weary sighs of day's end. But Hector remained motionless, a statue adrift in a world of constant motion. He wasn't truly heading anywhere. His driver had offered a ride home after the downtown meeting, but Hector had declined. The solitude of the subway felt strangely comforting compared to the emptiness of his house, even if it meant sharing the journey with strangers under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. The air within the train was warm, slightly stuffy, carrying the faint scent of aged upholstery and city grime. Hector's phone buzzed once in his pocket, signaling another email, likely urgent, undoubtedly unimportant. He ignored it. Instead, his gaze wandered towards the window, though the only view was the blur of concrete tunnel walls rushing past. His reflection stared back at him, the lines around his eyes etched deeper than he remembered. He hadn't truly looked at himself in weeks, perhaps longer. He adjusted his cufflink mechanically, not out of vanity, but habit. At the next stop, a small figure slipped onto the train with the practiced ease of someone who knew exactly where she was going. She was perhaps 7 or 8 years old, her skin a rich shade of brown, her hair a crown of tight curls gathered into a high puff. A coat that seemed several sizes too large engulfed her small frame. In one hand, she clutched a canvas tote bag overflowing with something bulky, groceries perhaps, and in the other, she dragged a smaller plastic bag, the sound of a bottle clinking softly inside. She surveyed the available seats like a general assessing the battlefield, then marched directly towards Hector. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice clear, yet slightly breathless. "Are you a cop?" Hector blinked, startled by the unexpected question. "What? You look like a cop," she said, nodding earnestly. "Like the ones in the movies, you know, the ones who don't talk much and always wear gray." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a cop." "Okay," she said, apparently satisfied. "Can I sit here?" She pointed to the empty seat beside him. He hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Sure." She plopped down with the confidence of someone who had earned her seat, shrugging the heavy tote bag off her shoulder and onto the floor with a thud. Her coat rustled loudly as she settled in, swinging her legs freely. For a moment, Hector glanced sideways at her, wondering if she was with someone, but no one else seemed to be paying attention to her, and she didn't appear concerned. The train lurched forward. They sat in silence for a minute or two. Hector turned his gaze back to the tunnel wall, trying to recapture the blankness he had been resting in. Then, she began to sing, softly at first, barely audible above the rumble of the train. "There goes my heart beating, 'cause you are the reason." The words struck Hector with the force of a physical blow. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. The girl's voice was high and untrained, but filled with a gentle sincerity. "I'm losing my sleep," she continued. "Please come back now." He turned his head slowly. She was singing to no one, or perhaps to everyone. Her small feet continued to swing, her hands folded in her lap. When she reached the chorus, "You are the reason," a few nearby passengers looked up from their phones. Some smiled. A few chuckled softly. One woman even pulled out her phone to record, but Hector couldn't smile. He couldn't. That song, it wasn't just any song. It was their song. The song that had played at the end of his wedding video. The one they used to dance to in the kitchen when Catherine still laughed without reservation. He hadn't heard it in years. He had tried not to. When the girl finished singing, there was a smattering of polite applause. She gave a small bow, then turned to Hector and said, "You looked sad. That's why I sang it." Hector's throat tightened. He cleared it. "Do I look that sad?" The girl shrugged. "Not the saddest I've seen, but up there." He let out a sound somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. "And singing helps. My mom says it does. She says music goes where medicine can't." He didn't respond. He looked down at the bag between her feet. What's in there? Groceries, medicine. Mama's sick today. She's sleeping now, so I want to get stuff. You went alone? She nodded. It's just the two of us, but I'm very good at walking. Hector studied her. She couldn't have been older than 8, maybe 9 if she was small for her age. There was a faint smudge of jam or sauce on her cheek, as if she had been snacking while running errands. Her eyes, however, were serious, focused, older than they should have been. He felt a pang of discomfort within him. He didn't want to name it, but he knew. She tilted her head at him. What's your name? Hector. I'm Melody, she said, like music. He nodded. Fitting. They rode in silence for another moment before she turned to him again. Are you going home? Not exactly. Good, because I was going to ask if you could help me carry these bags to my house. It's not far, but my hands hurt. Hector blinked. Do your neighbors know you're out here alone? Some do. Some pretend not to. He looked away. The train was slowing. His stop wasn't for another 3 stations, but somehow he found himself standing up as she gathered her bags. Which way? He asked. Melody grinned. Left at the top of the stairs. Then 3 blocks and the house with the red door. They stepped off the train together. As the doors closed behind them, Melody's small voice floated up again. Thanks, Mr. Not a Cop. You're nicer than you look. Hector didn't reply, but he did glance down at her as they walked, and for the first time in what felt like years, his chest felt a little less heavy. He didn't know why he was helping. Or perhaps he did. Perhaps there was something in her voice, in her face, that reminded him of something lost, or someone. He didn't want to name it yet. Not now. But he kept walking beside her towards the house with the red door. The house with the red door sat quietly on a corner lot, its paint chipped and faded, but still bright enough to catch the eye in the dusky light. Melody marched up the short walkway like she owned it, her small boots tapping confidently on the cracked concrete. Hector followed at a slower pace, his hands now tucked in the pockets of his coat. He wasn't sure why his steps had grown heavier the closer they got. He had never been to this part of the city before. The homes here were older, narrower, and closer together, and there was a stillness that seemed to settle over the neighborhood like a blanket at dusk. Melody reached the door and knocked twice with the back of her hand before calling out, Mama, I'm home, and I brought someone. The door opened slowly. The woman who stood in the frame was thinner than he remembered, her cheekbones more defined, her posture less upright. She wore a worn robe over a nightgown and had a hand braced against the door frame, not just for support, but perhaps also out of instinct, as if she needed to hold herself steady for what she saw. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, time stopped between them. 6 years vanished, then crashed back all at once, sharp and uninvited. Catherine. Hector's breath caught, but he said nothing. Catherine's lips parted slightly, then pressed together again with effort. Her eyes were guarded, but not empty. There was something alive behind them, something startled and aching. She was still beautiful, and that realization struck him harder than expected. Melody looked between them, confused by the silence. Mama, this is Mr. Hector. He helped me on the train. He's not a cop, even though he looks like one. The girl grinned. Catherine blinked once, then stepped aside. Come in, she said, her voice low, her eyes avoiding his now. The inside of the house was small but warm. A faint smell of eucalyptus and ginger tea hung in the air. There was clutter in the corners, tissues, books, children's drawings on the fridge, but nothing felt messy. It was the kind of lived-in chaos that came from trying to keep a home standing on too little rest. Hector stood awkwardly near the door as Melody shed her coat and ran to the kitchen. Catherine followed her with her gaze for a moment before turning back to him. What are you doing here, Hector? Her tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't welcoming either. It was measured, deliberate, and beneath it, barely audible, there was a tremor. He shifted his weight. I didn't know it was you. I met her by accident on the train. She was alone. I didn't know. She's always alone, Catherine said almost under her breath. She looked thinner up close, her skin pale in places that used to glow. Her eyes, though, were sharp, still full of the same quiet fire he remembered. You can sit, she added, gesturing towards the old couch. He sat. The springs creaked under him. Melody returned with a glass of water and placed it in Catherine's hand. He can stay for dinner, right? She asked brightly. He's nice. I like him. He made sure nobody bothered me. Catherine glanced at her daughter, then nodded. Sure, we have enough for one more. Dinner was simple reheated soup, some toast, and fruit from a bowl on the counter. They ate mostly in silence, except for Melody's chatter. She talked about a classmate who stole crayons, a dog she saw chasing a squirrel, and how she was learning multiplication, even though she hated numbers with an attitude. Hector listened, occasionally meeting Catherine's eyes. She didn't smile, but every now and then, her gaze lingered just a little too long, as if she was searching for something in him she both hoped and feared was still there. After dinner, Catherine began to clear the table, but her hands trembled. She winced and leaned against the counter. Hector stood. "Let me. I'm fine." She snapped too quickly, then softened. "I've got it." He didn't move. "You're sick." "I'm managing." "Not alone." "You're not." She turned to him slowly. "Why do you care now?" The question hung in the air. Melody had disappeared into another room, giving them space they hadn't asked for. Hector looked at Catherine, really looked at her, the worry lines on her face, the curve of her shoulders, the way her fingers curled slightly, as if still holding something that had long slipped away. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do." Catherine leaned back against the counter, her arms crossed. "I left because I was invisible, Hector, not unloved, just unseen. You never raised your voice, never hit me. But you didn't stand up for me either. Not once. Not when people looked at me like I didn't belong at your side. Not when your mother said our child would be a problem. Not when the restaurant hostess seated us by the bathroom." Hector's jaw tightened. He remembered those moments, everyone. He remembered doing nothing, saying nothing. "I was scared," he said, "of doing the wrong thing, of making it worse." "So you did nothing," Catherine said. "And nothing was exactly what broke me." There was no shouting, no tears, just a long quiet ache that settled between them like dust in an old room. Melody returned, dragging a small blanket, yawning. "Mama, can I lie on the couch? My room's too cold." "Of course, baby," Catherine said, moving slowly to help her. Hector watched as she tucked Melody in, brushing her daughter's hair back from her forehead. The tenderness in her gesture made his chest ache. "She doesn't know," he said softly. Catherine looked back at him. Her eyes didn't harden this time. Instead, they held a kind of sadness, distant, but weighted. "There are things she doesn't need to know. Not yet." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wouldn't have changed anything," she said, then paused. "And because I wasn't sure you were ready to be what she needed." Hector nodded slowly, unsettled. "And what is it she needs now?" Catherine didn't answer immediately. Her voice, when it came, was soft, almost tender. Someone who sees her completely, not just her face or her smile, but everything. He studied her, sensing the layers behind her words, feeling a knot twist in his stomach. Something about the way she spoke, the way she avoided the word daughter, kept echoing in his mind. The room was quiet again. Catherine sat in the armchair across from him, a blanket pulled over her lap. She looked tired. And yet, when she thought he wasn't watching, her gaze softened. She stared at him like someone looking at an old song, one that hurt to remember, but refused to be forgotten. Her fingers tugged absently at the fabric of the blanket. Her face was calm, but her chest rose and fell faster than before, betraying her. He moved to the far end of the couch, folding his coat into a makeshift pillow. Melody was already asleep, breathing softly. Catherine turned off the main light, leaving the soft glow of a lamp on the bookshelf. As he lay down, Hector stared at the ceiling. He had always thought of himself as decent, fair. But fairness didn't mean much if it came with silence. And tonight, for the first time in years, he felt the weight of that silence more than ever. From across the room, Catherine's voice came quietly through the dark. "You could have been a good father." He turned his head toward her, though he could barely see her face in the dim light. "Maybe I still can." Neither of them said anything more. But in the quiet, her heart beat louder than her words, and for the first time since he arrived, she didn't look away. The next morning came with a strange stillness. The sun filtered through half-closed blinds, drawing soft gold lines across the living room carpet. Hector had barely slept. He'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the shallow rhythm of Melody's breathing from the couch beside him, and the occasional stirrings from the room Catherine had gone into. Every now and then, he'd glance over at the sleeping girl, and find himself noticing things he hadn't allowed himself to process before: the tilt of her chin, the faint dimple in her left cheek, the curve of her brow when she twitched in sleep. All of it tugged at something deep and instinctual in him. He wasn't ready to say it out loud, but in the quiet, with no one watching, his heart had already crossed the line, his mind was still resisting. By midday, when Catherine left for a quick clinic visit, "Just blood work," she said. Brushing him off, Hector stayed back with Melody. She insisted on showing him her rock collection, her unfinished puzzle, and a crooked drawing of a castle with a stick figure family of 3 in front of it. Hector stared at the drawing longer than she expected. She tilted her head watching him. "You look like him," she said. He blinked. "Like who?" "The guy in the drawing," she said simply. "The one who lives in the castle with us. Mama says he's a good man who got lost, but maybe he's finding his way back." Hector felt his throat tighten, but he forced a smile. "That's so," she nodded, then pointed to the figure beside the castle. "That's me, but I made my hair too long. Mama says, I have your ears though. I mean his ears." She looked up, blinking, then quickly grabbed another crayon and scribbled over the ears. "Maybe they're just regular ears. Never mind." That afternoon, when Melody went down for a nap, Hector slipped into the bathroom. He'd noticed her hairbrush on the sink earlier. The handle was pink, the bristles full of tiny strands of her soft brown curls. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled 2 hairs free and sealed them into a sandwich bag he found in the kitchen drawer. It felt invasive wrong, but not knowing felt worse. He made a quiet call to an old friend, Min, his assistant from the office, who owed him more than a few favors and never asked unnecessary questions. "I need a DNA match run," he said simply. "Just tell me if it's possible and fast." Min hesitated. "Is this personal?" "Very." She didn't ask more. "Give me 24 hours. I know someone in diagnostics. I'll call you as soon as I have it." That night was tense. Catherine didn't ask where he went when he stepped out briefly. Melody didn't bring up the drawing again, but something had shifted in the room, like all 3 of them were holding their breath without knowing why. By the next evening, Hector's phone buzzed as he stood outside Catherine's kitchen window, watching the sky darken over the narrow backyard. Min's voice was calm but clear. "She's yours, no doubt." He said nothing, just stood there for a moment as if the air had thickened around him. When he finally whispered, "Thank you," and ended the call, he didn't move right away. The world hadn't changed, but he had. He walked back inside like he was carrying something sacred and unbearable at once. Catherine was on the couch with Melody curled beside her, half asleep. The television played softly in the background. Hector stood there, his coat still in his hand, and she looked up at him, instantly reading his face. She rose slowly, motioned for him to follow, and led him into the kitchen. When she turned to him, her expression was already weary. "You did a test, didn't you?" He nodded. "No use lying now." And he didn't speak, just pulled the folded paper from his coat pocket and handed it to her. Catherine stared at it for a long time without unfolding it. "I already knew," she said. "Why didn't you tell me?" She exhaled, her shoulders trembling. "Because I didn't want her to grow up thinking she was some kind of strategy. Because people like me, women who look like me, don't get the benefit of the doubt. If I told you back then, what would you have thought, that I got pregnant to keep you to climb?" "No," he said softly. "I might have, but I'd have been wrong." Catherine shook her head. "And I wasn't ready to carry the shame of being doubted on top of everything else. I chose silence, not out of hate, out of survival." He reached for the counter, steadying himself. "I miss so much. We all did." That was when a small voice cut through the air behind them. "Missed what?" They turned. Melody stood in the hallway, rubbing her eyes, but clearly wide awake. Her gaze moved between them, and then to the paper in Catherine's hand. She walked closer. "Oh, what is it? Why are you crying?" Catherine opened her mouth, then closed it again. Hector knelt slowly, meeting Melody at eye level. He placed a hand on his heart. "Melody," he said gently, "sometimes families don't start the way they should, and sometimes people don't show up when they should have. But I'm here now, and I need to tell you something very important." Her brow furrowed. She looked at her mother, then back at Hector. "You're my dad," he nodded. "Yes, I am." Her lips quivered. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Catherine knelt beside them, tears in her eyes. "Because I was scared, baby. Not of you. Of the world, of what it might do to you. I wanted you to grow up strong first and loved. Was I a mistake?" Catherine choked back a sob. "No, never." Hector pulled her gently into his arms. "You are the best thing I never knew I needed. And I will spend every day from now proving that. If you'll let me." Melody sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Then, With a small smile breaking through her tears, she whispered, "So, does this mean I get 2 Christmas presents now?" Catherine burst out laughing through her tears. Hector hugged them both tighter. "Only if you promise not to grow up too fast," he said, voice thick. And just like that, in the small kitchen lit by one flickering bulb and years of unspoken truths, a broken family began to heal. Not with fanfare or fireworks, but with quiet, honest words and arms wrapped tight around each other. For the first time in years, the silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like peace. It started with a cough, not a sharp one, but deep and persistent. The kind that made Melody freeze in the hallway and peer anxiously into her mother's room. Catherine was lying on her side, a blanket clutched close, her brow damp. Hector stepped in behind the girl, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Is she okay?" Melody nodded uncertainly. "She gets like this sometimes. Usually passes, but she didn't eat much yesterday." Catherine stirred her voice and barely above a whisper. "Mel, water." Hector moved faster than he meant to, grabbing the nearest glass and filling it with cool tap water, returning in seconds. She took a sip, coughed again, then leaned back, eyes fluttering closed. He crouched beside her, brushing a damp curl from her forehead. "You've got a fever," he murmured gently, placing a hand on her cheek. It was warm, too warm. Melody lingered at the doorframe, hugging her arms. "She's had it worse. Last time she slept all day." "We need to keep her hydrated," Hector said, already calculating the next steps. "I'll make soup or something close enough." The kitchen was a mystery to him. Cabinets opened and closed in a mild panic as he searched for broth, rice, ginger, anything that sounded healing. Melody clambered onto the counter, giving commentary as if she were the host of a cooking show. "You know, you hold that knife like it's going to bite you," she teased. "You've never cooked, have you?" "Not unless microwaving counts." "It doesn't." She grinned, hopping down. "Okay, executive chef, let me assist. You do the stirring. I'll supervise." Back in the bedroom, Catherine drifted in and out of sleep. Her breathing steadied as Hector placed a cool cloth on her forehead. She murmured occasionally incoherent words, but one name came through again and again. Hector. Melody, sitting nearby with a coloring book. She looked up quietly, the question hanging unspoken in the air. "She says your name a lot when she's asleep, more than she knows." It was a soft admission, a glimpse into Catherine's subconscious world. He turned to her slowly, searching for something in her eyes. "Yeah," she said softly, flipping a page in her book, though she wasn't really reading. "Sometimes I used to hear her late at night." She never said it like she was mad, more like she missed you, even if she wouldn't say it when she's awake. It was a longing, a healing ache that echoed through the quiet hours. The words stayed with him all through the evening, settling deep within his heart. As Catherine dozed in her room, the exhaustion finally claiming her, he cleaned up the kitchen, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. Melody danced between rooms in fuzzy socks, singing off-key renditions of old pop songs, her carefree spirit a beacon in the subdued atmosphere. When he burnt the toast, a plume of smoke momentarily filling the air, she clapped with genuine delight. "Bravo, Chef Disaster! Nailed it!" she exclaimed, her laughter light and infectious. Later, when the soup was finally decent, a simple broth made with care and intention, Catherine sipped a little, her eyes closed. "Thank you," she whispered, the words barely audible. "It's just soup," he said, his voice low and gentle. "No," she replied, her gaze meeting his, a depth of emotion swirling within them. "It's presence, that's what matters. It's the presence of you, of Melody, of this moment." That night, Melody insisted he sleep on the couch again, a small act of protectiveness fueled by love. She took a blanket and curled into a sleeping bag nearby, a tiny guardian against the unknown. "Just in case Mom needs something," she explained, her voice already heavy with sleep. In the quiet dark, Hector stared at the ceiling again, but the silence didn't feel quite so hollow. It was filled with the soft rhythm of Catherine's breathing, the gentle rustle of Melody's sleeping bag, and a nascent hope that flickered in his chest. In the middle of the night, Catherine stirred, half-conscious, lost in the limbo between sleep and wakefulness. Her hand reached out blindly, searching for something familiar, something grounding. Her fingers found his where it rested on the edge of the bed, and she squeezed it gently, a silent communication passing between them. He whispered, "I'm here," his voice a soft reassurance in the darkness. The next morning, Catherine was stronger. Not well, but better. The darkness had receded slightly, and a faint light shone in her eyes. She walked slowly into the kitchen to find Melody and Hector bickering over how many marshmallows belong in hot chocolate, their playful argument filling the room with a sense of normalcy. "It's not dessert," Hector argued, his voice teasing. "It absolutely is," Melody countered, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "And she'll agree with me, right, Mom?" Catherine managed a small smile, a genuine expression of joy. "I plead the fifth," she said, her voice still a little weak, but filled with warmth. They sat down for a late breakfast, Melody dominating the conversation with stories about school, her favorite cartoons, and the time she tried to build a squirrel feeder and ended up attracting raccoons, a chaotic and hilarious tale that unfolded with youthful enthusiasm. Catherine listened, sipping tea, her hand resting absently near Hector's on the table, a subtle connection that spoke volumes. Later that afternoon, as Melody painted in the living room, vibrant colors splashing across the canvas, Hector and Catherine sat quietly in the kitchen, the silence comfortable and companionable. She looked at him carefully, her eyes searching his face. "You remember that hotel in Richmond? The one you took me to for our anniversary," she began, her voice low. He nodded, his gaze meeting hers. "You love the garden," she continued. "You don't remember the lobby, do you?" He frowned, trying to recall the details. "I wasn't allowed to check in alone, even with the reservation in my name," she said, the words laced with a quiet pain. "The clerk asked if I was the nanny." Her voice was steady, but low, each word carrying the weight of unspoken hurt. "You came in 5 minutes later." He changed his tone so fast, "But you didn't say anything." "Not to him, not to me." Hector's face fell, a wave of remorse washing over him. "I thought ignoring it would avoid a scene," he said, his voice filled with regret. "It was already a scene," she replied softly. "Just one where I stood alone." He took a breath, the weight of his past actions heavy on his shoulders, then reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I was wrong," he said, his voice sincere. "I was a coward." She looked at their fingers intertwined, the connection fragile yet strong. "When you're silent, they win," she said, her gaze meeting his. "Then I'm done being silent." Melody appeared, an apron tied around her waist and a smudge of paint on her cheek, her artistic flair evident in her disheveled appearance. "Did I miss something serious? Because this kitchen smells like honesty and regret," she quipped, her youthful perception surprisingly astute. Catherine burst into laughter, the sound light and healing, chasing away the lingering shadows. Hector shook his head, chuckling. "Come here, you sass machine," he said, scooping her up in a hug, his love for his daughter overflowing. "Ah, abuse of parental power," she squealed, her voice filled with playful protest. "Somebody call child services." And as they laughed, something tender settled in the space between them. A warmth not just of old love reignited, but of a new kind of home being rebuilt, one small act at a time, brick by brick, with honesty, forgiveness, and unwavering love. It was a Saturday afternoon, just warm enough to leave jackets behind, just cool enough for the breeze to matter. The city park stretched wide under a crisp autumn sky, leaves brushing the sidewalks in lazy spirals, creating a mosaic of color underfoot. Melody had been asking for days to go somewhere fun. Not the grocery store, not the pharmacy, not the laundromat, actual fun, she'd pleaded, her youthful energy demanding an outlet. So Hector, who had never been one for public parks or roller coasters, or anything involving unstructured play, found himself trailing behind Melody and Catherine as they strolled into the park entrance, a reluctant participant transformed by the power of love. He carried a picnic bag in one hand and Catherine's scarf in the other, small gestures of care and attentiveness. Catherine, though walking beside him, seemed different today, more relaxed, her shoulders less tense, but guarded still. Her eyes scanned the landscape, like she wasn't fully convinced she deserved a simple afternoon like this, a lingering fear that the happiness was fleeting. Melody was already several steps ahead, pointing at a miniature train ride that circled a shaded loop near the duck pond, her excitement palpable. "We're doing that," she declared, spinning in place, her laughter echoing through the park. But first, the haunted house. Hector blinked, his brow furrowed in confusion. Haunted what? Catherine chuckled, almost despite herself, the sound genuine and light. It's not really a house. It's one of those carnival-style ghost trains. You sit in a cart, and they wheel you through a dark tunnel with flashing lights and bad animatronics, she explained, her voice laced with amusement. Melody clapped, her eyes shining with anticipation. It's tradition, she declared, her youthful enthusiasm infectious. They bought tickets and stood in line behind a group of teenagers giggling over cotton candy, their carefree laughter filling the air. Hector noted Catherine's shoulders tensing as they moved closer to the entrance, the anticipation stirring something within her. She kept adjusting her grip on her purse strap, eyes fixed forward, her unease growing with each step. When the ride operator waved them into a cart barely big enough for three, Melody scrambled in first, her excitement undeterred. Then Hector and Catherine last, their bodies close in the confined space. As the cart lurched forward and the darkness swallowed them, the atmosphere changed immediately, the playful anticipation replaced by a sense of foreboding. Screeches piped in through hidden speakers, artificial cobwebs brushed against their faces, and lights blinked in and out, revealing poorly made skeletons and glowing red eyes and foam skulls, the cheap thrills of a carnival haunted house. Melody squealed with delight, clinging to the edge of the cart, her fear replaced by pure enjoyment. Then came the full blackout, the darkness complete and absolute. It only lasted a few seconds, but in that time, Hector felt Catherine seize up beside him, her body rigid with fear. Her breathing quickened, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hand reached blindly, gripping his wrist tight enough to leave a mark, a desperate plea for connection in the disorienting darkness. She wasn't saying anything, just shaking, like a panic had come over her with no warning, a sudden plunge into a forgotten nightmare. Catherine, he whispered, barely audible over the ride soundtrack, his voice filled with concern. It's okay. I'm here. Her fingers found the fabric of his coat and balled into it, her grip desperate and unwavering. Her head dropped to his shoulder, her body trembling. She was rigid, not from the ride, but from something older, deeper, a wound that had never fully healed. He placed an arm around her, not tightly, just enough so she could lean, just enough to offer comfort and support. So she wouldn't feel alone in the dark, so she would know that she wasn't fighting this battle by herself. The lights flickered back on, breaking the spell of darkness. The rest of the ride passed in a blur, a few more mannequins, a fake scream, a mist machine at the exit, but none of them spoke, their attention focused on Catherine's well-being. Not until the cart stopped and Melody bounced out laughing, her youthful exuberance undeterred by the darkness. That was so lame, Mama, she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. You screamed like 5 times. Catherine stepped out slowly, straightening her coat, trying to regain her composure. She didn't answer, her thoughts still caught in the darkness. They walked to the picnic area in silence, laid out a blanket on the soft grass, creating a space for connection and conversation. Melody ran off toward the swings, giving them space, her intuitive understanding surprising and comforting. Hector watched Catherine as she poured apple juice into a plastic cup, her hands still trembling, the effects of the panic attack lingering. I didn't mean to grab you, she said quietly, her voice filled with remorse. You didn't scare me, he replied, his eyes meeting hers. It wasn't the ride. Not really. It's the dark, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I never used to be afraid of it, but after I left, there were a lot of nights when I was alone, and everything was dark, and I didn't know how to keep Melody warm or fed or safe. It's not ghosts that haunt you, she continued, her voice growing stronger. It's being invisible in the daylight. Hector nodded, letting her speak, giving her the space to express her fears and vulnerabilities. The breeze rustled a strand of hair across her cheek, a soft caress from nature. He reached to tuck it behind her ear, a gesture of tenderness, hesitated, then let his hand fall, unsure of his place. She noticed the hesitation, her eyes following his movement. You can, she said, her voice low, a silent invitation. He looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. Can what? Touch me like that? He asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. If it still means something. He did gently, his fingers brushing against her skin, a spark of connection igniting between them. Then she looked at him, really looked at him, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a shared wound, a hope that neither dared voice out loud, a longing for a future together. When he leaned in, it wasn't rushed, wasn't grand or choreographed or desperate. It was quiet, warm, and true, a gentle expression of love and forgiveness. Their lips met, the world stilled, and for a moment, the weight of 6 years dissolved, the years of separation and pain fading into the background. Melody, returning with a popsicle and dirt on her jeans, saw them from across the lawn, her youthful observation shattering the moment of intimacy. She raised an eyebrow, grinning, her playful spirit undeterred. Well, she called out, her voice teasing. Do I need to give you 2 a minute, or are we officially a rom-com now? Catherine laughed, a blush rising on her cheeks. Hector chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck, his embarrassment evident. We were just talking, he said, his voice a little flustered. With your mouths closed, Melody retorted, her eyes sparkling with amusement. That's new. She plopped down beside them on the blanket, sighing contentedly. Y'all are cute. Weird, but cute, she declared, her unfiltered honesty both endearing and comical. Catherine looked at Melody, then at Hector, her heart filled with a mixture of love and gratitude. Her hand found his again, and this time she didn't let go, the connection strong and unwavering. That evening, when they returned home, Melody was unusually quiet, not upset, just contemplative, her youthful mind processing the events of the day. As she got ready for bed, she paused by Catherine's bedroom door, her small frame silhouetted in the soft light. Mama, she said, her voice hesitant but sincere. You were happy today. Like really happy. I like that. Catherine pulled her into a hug, her heart overflowing with love for her daughter. Me, too. Baby, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Even with the haunted skeleton clown thing? Melody asked, her voice muffled against Catherine's shoulder. Even with that, Catherine replied, her laughter soft and genuine. Later, in her room, Melody scribbled in her journal by flashlight, careful not to wake anyone, her thoughts taking shape on the page. Today, she wrote, we screamed in a ghost train. Mama cried. He held her. Then they kissed. It was weird, but good weird. I think maybe families don't start perfect. They start small and brave and a little messy, but maybe that's enough. And for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel like a place where things were broken, a monument to past hurts and disappointments. It felt like a place where they could start again, a sanctuary of love and forgiveness, where they could build a new future together, one small step at a time. The morning after the ghost train ride, something unspoken lingered between them, like a warm hum underneath the quiet, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The house held a gentle stillness, not from discomfort, but from a new kind of awareness, like everyone was cautiously exhaling together after holding their breath for too long, a collective sigh of relief. Catherine moved with slightly less hesitation, her steps slow but no longer guarded, her confidence returning with each passing day. Hector brewed coffee for 3, even if Melody was still too young to drink it, a ritual of care and attentiveness. And Melody, ever the catalyst, was unusually thoughtful at breakfast, her spoon making slow circles in her cereal bowl, her youthful mind working through complex emotions. It wasn't until later that day, while helping Hector organize an old bookshelf in the den, that Melody blurted it out, her thoughts finally finding their voice. She held up a photo of a much younger Hector in college robes standing next to an older man in a gray suit, her brow furrowed in contemplation. Did you ever think of naming your kid after you? Like, Adams Jr. or something? She asked, tilting her head, her curiosity piqued. Hector chuckled softly, brushing dust off the spine of a book, his eyes meeting hers. Maybe once or twice, but I always figured if I had a kid, they'd earn their own name. Not mine, he said, his voice filled with a gentle pride. Melody looked thoughtful, hugging the photo to her chest for a second, her emotions bubbling to the surface. What if I wanted to choose it myself? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hector paused, his movement still. He met her eyes, surprised by the weight in her voice, the depth of her yearning. "What are you saying, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She took a deep breath, her eyes flicking toward the hallway as if checking whether Catherine might be listening, her nervousness evident. "I want to change my last name to Adams," she blurted out, her voice filled with both fear and hope. "Not because I don't love Mom, I do, but I want to be part of both of you officially. I'm tired of feeling like I only belong halfway," she confessed, her vulnerability disarming. Hector didn't answer right away, his throat tightening with emotion. He found himself blinking more than usual, tears pricking at his eyes. He reached for the photo in her hands and set it down gently, his touch filled with love and tenderness. "Did you tell your mom this yet?" he asked, his voice soft. "Not yet. I wanted to see what you thought first," Melody said, suddenly unsure, her confidence wavering. "Do you think it's a bad idea?" "I think," Hector said slowly, his voice filled with sincerity, "it's one of the bravest things anyone's ever said to me." That evening after dinner, Melody brought it up again, this time with both of them present, her courage bolstered by Hector's support. They were sitting in the living room, a space filled with warmth and comfort, Melody curled up in her beanbag chair, Catherine nursing a cup of tea, and Hector thumbing through emails on his tablet, their routines familiar and comforting. "I want to change my name," Melody said, her voice firm but not defiant, her gaze steady. Catherine raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "To what exactly?" she asked gently. "Melody Adams, or maybe Melody Catherine Adams," she added, glancing at her mother with a hopeful smile, her eyes pleading for acceptance. Catherine didn't answer right away. She set her cup down, took a slow breath, then looked at Hector, her gaze seeking his guidance. He didn't say anything, just watched her with quiet encouragement, his support unwavering. "Is this about wanting to feel more connected to your father?" she asked gently, her voice filled with love and understanding. Melody nodded, her emotions bubbling to the surface. "It's about choosing who I am, choosing both of you," she explained, her voice filled with conviction. "I'm proud of where I come from, but I don't want to feel like I have to explain myself every time someone asks why my last name's different. I want it to make sense to me," she confessed, her vulnerability touching Catherine's heart. Catherine's eyes softened, her love for Melody overflowing. She leaned back, crossing her arms, not in resistance, but in contemplation, carefully considering her daughter's needs. "You don't have to carry my name to carry my love, baby," she said, her voice filled with tenderness. "But if that's what feels right to you, then yes. Melody Catherine Adams sounds just right," she concluded, her voice filled with warmth and acceptance. Melody's smile bloomed full and bright, her relief evident. Hector exhaled, almost like he'd been holding his breath, his heart filled with gratitude. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, trying to lighten the mood. "Looks like we have paperwork to fill out." The following week, the school held a small acknowledgement ceremony in Melody's homeroom, a recognition of her new identity. It wasn't elaborate, no banners or cake, but it meant the world, a symbol of acceptance and belonging. Melody stood in front of her classmates, wearing a simple blue dress and a pin with her new initials, her confidence shining through. Hector and Catherine sat in the back row, side by side, proud and still, their love for their daughter unwavering. "Hi," Melody began, her voice confident but warm, reaching out to her classmates. "I'm Melody Catherine Adams, and I'm proud of every part of that name, because it comes from people who fought hard to become a family again," she declared, her words resonating with truth and honesty. The room applauded, their support evident. Some kids cheered, their youthful enthusiasm contagious. The teacher smiled wide, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, touched by the heartfelt moment. But not everyone clapped, their prejudice casting a shadow on the celebration. In the row behind Hector, a woman leaned in close to the man beside her and said, just loud enough for them to hear, "Changing names now, huh? Anything for a scholarship these days?" Her words were filled with cynicism and disdain, a subtle act of aggression. The words weren't shouted, but they struck like a slap, their venomous intent clear. Hector's jaw clenched, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Catherine heard it, too, her protective instincts kicking in. He felt her fingers tighten around his, a silent plea for restraint. She leaned over and whispered, "Not here. Not now. Let her moment be hers," her voice filled with wisdom and understanding. He nodded, his shoulders stiff, anger simmering beneath the surface, but he said nothing, his love for Melody outweighing his desire to confront the woman. Melody hadn't heard it, and that mattered more, her happiness the priority. That night, the three of them went out for dinner at a local diner, a celebration of their newfound unity. Melody ordered her usual chicken tenders and fries, her comfort food of choice. Hector tried a new burger and gave it a mixed review, his honesty endearing. Catherine went with soup and salad, claiming she was trying to be healthy, her commitment to well-being unwavering. The neon lights outside flickered with a comforting buzz, casting a warm glow on the diner. Midway through the meal, Melody pointed her fork at Hector, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "So now that I'm officially in Adams, does that mean I get to inherit your terrible fashion sense, too?" she asked, her tone teasing. He raised an eyebrow, feigning offense. "Excuse me," he exclaimed, his voice filled with mock indignation. "You wear ties at home?" she said, deadpan, her comedic timing impeccable. "At home." Catherine laughed, her mirth filling the air. "She's got you there," she added, siding with Melody. Hector mock gasped, his playful spirit shining through. "This is the thanks I get after all the late-night soup and DNA tests," he exclaimed, his voice filled with mock despair. Melody giggled, her youthful laughter contagious. "I love you, but I'm still hiding your sandals next summer," she threatened, her playful spirit undeterred. The laughter came easily now, not forced, not fragile, but genuine and heartfelt. It wrapped around them like a well-worn quilt, proof that love had grown in the cracks of what once was broken, a testament to their resilience. Later that night, as they folded laundry together in the living room, sharing the mundane tasks of family life, Melody crawled into a pillow fort with a flashlight and her journal, creating a world of her own. "Hey, Dad," she called out, her voice muffled. "Yeah, honey," Hector replied, his voice filled with affection. "Do I get to change my name again if I mess up really bad one day?" she asked, her insecurity surfacing. Hector smiled, folding a towel, his heart filled with love for his daughter. "Nope. You're stuck with us now," he reassured her, his voice filled with unwavering commitment. "Cool," she said, her voice filled with relief. "Just checking," she added, her anxieties assuaged. And under that roof, with all its imperfections and memories, the Addams family, however new, however hard won, finally felt whole, their love a beacon in the darkness. It was 2 days later when the knock came, sharp and deliberate, like a note played too hard on a piano, shattering the peace. Catherine opened the door and froze, her heart sinking at the sight before her. Priscilla Bradley stood there in a beige trench coat that probably cost more than their monthly groceries, her presence radiating wealth and privilege. Her lipstick was perfect, her heels too high for a casual drop-in, and her smile held just enough curve to pretend kindness while letting disdain peek through, a subtle display of power. "Hello, Catherine," she said, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside, her entitlement clear. "I was in the area and thought I'd drop by. Hector mentioned Melody so much lately. I just had to meet the little star," she added, her words laced with a subtle condescension. Catherine didn't respond, not right away, her composure unwavering. She closed the door behind Priscilla slowly, like she was sealing in the tension now hanging in the air, protecting her family from the intruder. "Melody's upstairs," she said, her voice calm but firm. Priscilla looked around the modest living room, her gaze skipping over the pillow fort remnants and a half-dried science project on the kitchen counter, her disdain evident. "Charming," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You really kept things simple." "We call it living within means," Catherine replied, her voice calm but firm, refusing to be intimidated. "Of course, nothing wrong with that," Priscilla said sweetly, her smile tightening. "Though I must admit, I never imagined Hector settling into this sort of setup." "He's not settling. He's choosing," Catherine said, her voice low and clear, and that word landed like a quiet warning, a subtle assertion of their love. Before Priscilla could return fire, Melody bounded down the stairs, her youthful energy undeterred, wearing a sparkly headband and mismatched socks, her unique style shining through. "Mom, who's the lady who smells like my teacher's office?" she asked, her innocent observation piercing the tension. Priscilla chuckled, bending slightly, her smile forced. I'm a friend of your dad's. He talks about you constantly, she said, her words insincere. That's weird, Melody said, tilting her head, her perception sharp. He usually talks about Mom. Catherine bit back a grin, her heart swelling with pride. Priscilla straightened, her smile tightening, her patience wearing thin. You're quite the sharp one, she said, her tone condescending. Takes after your mom, I suppose, she added, her words double-edged. Melody folded her arms, her stance defensive. Is that supposed to be a compliment or something else? She challenged, her spirit unwavering. Priscilla's eyes flickered, her mask slipping. I'm just observing, she said, her voice icy. You're spirited. A very spirited little brown girl pretending to be so sweet, she spat, her true colors revealed. It happened in 1 second, sharp and clean, an explosion of righteous anger. Catherine stepped forward and slapped Priscilla across the face, her actions swift and decisive. The sound cracked in the air like thunder, a release of years of pent-up rage. Silence followed, broken only by their ragged breathing. Priscilla blinked, stunned, her hand going to her cheek, her perfect facade shattered. You don't talk to my daughter like that, Catherine said, her voice low, clear, and final, a declaration of war. Priscilla collected herself, smoothed her coat, and turned to leave, her anger simmering beneath the surface. This won't last, she said at the door, her voice filled with malice. He always returns to his world. Just then, the door opened again, Hector holding groceries, his timing impeccable. He looked at Priscilla, at Catherine, and then back again, confusion etched on his face. Everything okay? He asked, his voice filled with concern. Catherine nodded, her chin held high. Handled, she said, her voice weary but triumphant. Priscilla walked past him without another word, her pride wounded. Hector looked at Catherine, unsure whether to ask, his eyes searching hers for answers. Catherine gave him a half-smile, weary but triumphant, her love for him shining through. I think she'll keep her distance now, she said, her voice filled with hope. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt like it belonged to them alone, a sanctuary of love and protection. The tension of Priscilla's visit still hung faintly in the air days later, like the aftertaste of something sour that lingered on the tongue, a reminder of the prejudice they faced. But something had shifted since then, something deeper than a slammed door or a slapped cheek, a fundamental change in their dynamic. Catherine moved through the house with a steadiness that hadn't been there before, her confidence growing with each passing day. Melody sang more freely, her voice filled with joy, and left doodles of wedding dresses on scraps of paper, her dreams taking flight. And Hector, though he said little, had a certain look in his eyes that Catherine recognized from years ago, a look of someone finally ready to stay, his commitment unwavering. He proposed on a Wednesday evening, not with a kneel or a ring in a box, but with a quiet statement while folding laundry at the end of the couch, a testament to their everyday love. I want to marry you again, he said, his voice clear, low, and calm, his intentions sincere. Catherine didn't laugh, she didn't cry. She looked at him like she was reading the fine print of something she already suspected, her heart filled with love and hope, then nodded once, her decision made. Then let's do it right this time, she said, her voice filled with determination. The wedding was set for a Saturday afternoon at the Langford Grand, a restored historic hotel downtown with high ceilings, marble floors, and a rooftop terrace that overlooked the city skyline, a symbol of their renewed love and commitment. Catherine had never imagined herself in such a place, not because she didn't dream, but because she'd learned early not to, her expectations tempered by past disappointments. But Hector insisted. He said she deserved not only love, but recognition, a celebration of their journey. That they all did, he added, his voice filled with conviction. The day arrived with clear skies and an expensive stillness in the air, a sense of anticipation hanging in the balance. Guests took their seats on gold-framed chairs lined in rows across the terrace, their whispers hushed. A quartet played soft jazz, their melodies creating a romantic atmosphere. White roses and pale green eucalyptus spilled from glass vases along the aisle, adding a touch of elegance and serenity. Catherine stepped out onto the marble walkway in an ivory satin gown that hugged her figure, simple but commanding, her beauty radiating from within. Her hair was pinned into a low chignon, her elegance understated. Small diamond earrings glinted with each step, adding a subtle sparkle. She walked alone, chin lifted, eyes steady, her confidence unwavering, and the guests, mostly Hector's peers and clients, a few colleagues from old business circles, stood to acknowledge her presence, their respect evident. Hector waited at the front in a charcoal suit, not a single hair out of place, his love for Catherine shining in his eyes. Melody stood beside him in a seafoam green dress, gripping a bouquet half her size, her youthful charm adding to the beauty of the scene. As Catherine approached, Melody whispered, "You look like a movie star, Mom," her admiration shining through. Catherine smiled without breaking stride, her heart swelling with love for her daughter. The officiant spoke briefly, but the vows were their own, heartfelt and sincere. Hector took her hand and said, "I failed you once by not standing beside you when it mattered," my voice filled with regret. "I will not make that mistake again. I'm not the man I used to be, and I don't want to be," he declared, his honesty disarming. "I want to be the man who walks beside you, behind you, and sometimes a step ahead just to open the door," he promised, his commitment unwavering. Catherine's voice was steady but tender, her emotions laid bare. "I left because I couldn't breathe," she admitted, her voice filled with vulnerability. "But I never stopped loving you. I just stopped recognizing who you were." This version, the one who shows up, listens, holds my hand when it shakes. I say yes to him every day. Yes, she affirmed, her love for Hector shining through. They exchanged rings, symbols of their renewed commitment, their fingers intertwined. Melody handed them over, standing tall, her heart filled with joy. No longer the girl who sat alone on a train, but someone who belonged, her sense of belonging complete. After the ceremony, the reception glowed under chandeliers in the hotel ballroom, creating a magical atmosphere. Linen-draped tables, crystal glassware, and a jazz band filled the air with melody and warmth, adding to the elegance of the celebration. The food was elegant stuffed chicken, wild rice, miniature cream brulees, a feast for the senses. Catherine danced with Melody first, then with Hector, then with herself as Melody cheered and tried to copy her moves, their joy infectious. At one point, a woman in a navy sheath dress leaned toward her husband and murmured, "Very modern of him," her voice laced with sarcasm. In a racial marriage, middle-aged renewal vows a child with a hyphenated name. Progressive branding, I suppose, she added, her prejudice showing through. Hector overheard, stepped closer, and without raising his voice said, "It's not branding. It's home, and I suggest you learn the difference," his voice filled with conviction. The woman blinked, then turned away, her discomfort evident. Catherine caught Hector's eye across the dance floor and nodded slightly, her gratitude unwavering. Later in the evening, Melody stood up with a small piece of paper in hand, her nervousness evident. "I wasn't going to say anything," she began, her voice slightly shaky, her vulnerability touching their hearts. "But I figured if you can stand in front of everyone and promise forever, I can say thank you not just for the cake or the dress or this crazy fancy hotel, but for choosing each other again, for not giving up, for making space for me to be both of you, not just one," she declared, her voice filled with emotion. The room clapped, their support unwavering. Catherine wiped her eye, her heart swelling with love for her daughter. Hector pulled Melody into a hug, his gratitude overflowing. The photographer caught it all, capturing the beauty and emotion of the moment. Before the cake cutting, Melody slipped a folded note into Hector's tux pocket, her playful spirit shining through. He found it later in the restroom, smoothed it open, his curiosity piqued. In her loopy, half-cursive handwriting, it read, "Repeat after me. I love you even when you burn the Thanksgiving turkey." "Say it. She's going to test you," her humor endearing. He laughed alone in front of the mirror, his heart filled with joy, and for the first time in a very long time, felt completely at peace in his skin, his happiness complete. They left the hotel close to midnight, the limo full of leftover favors and Melody's extra shoes. The car idled softly, a gentle hum against the world outside, but within its cocoon, silence reigned, broken only by the unspoken melody of intertwined hands, a quiet promise whispered, not of flawless perfection, but of unwavering presence. For this family, forged in the fires of adversity, presence was everything, a gift more precious than any material offering. The Monday after the wedding celebrations, Melody, vibrant and full of youthful energy, practically bounced into the kitchen, her school backpack slung over her shoulder, a grin so wide it threatened to spill over the edges of her face. The house still wore the warm remnants of celebration ribbons languidly tied to chairbacks, a bouquet of flowers drooping gracefully in a mason jar, and a scattering of confetti stubbornly clinging to the space beneath the couch, a testament to joy too abundant to contain. Hector, a picture of domesticity, was expertly scrambling eggs while Catherine, still wrapped in the soft embrace of her robe, her hair casually pinned up, poured glasses of bright orange juice. Melody, seizing a slice of toast, took a dramatic bite and announced, "Today's the big audition. I'm trying out for Princess Lyana." Catherine blinked, a moment of surprise flickering across her face. "Wait, you didn't tell us it was today." "Surprise," Melody chirped, already halfway out the door. "Wish me luck." The audition unfolded with a grace and ease that even surprised Melody herself. Her lines flowed effortlessly, each word articulated with crystal clarity, her posture radiating a regal poise, and even the notoriously discerning music teacher offered a nod of appreciation. The next morning, when the cast list was posted on the bulletin board, Melody's name shone brightly at the very top, emblazoned next to the coveted title role. Unable to contain her exuberant joy, she raced home, waving the sheet like a triumphant flag, a beacon of her accomplishment. But that unadulterated joy lasted a mere 3 days. On the 4th day, Melody returned home shrouded in an unusual silence. She dropped her backpack heavily by the door and sank into the depths of the couch, her usual effervescence replaced by a palpable sadness. Catherine and Hector exchanged a worried glance before settling down beside her. "Did something happen, sweetheart?" Catherine asked gently, her voice laced with concern. Melody shrugged, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "They gave the role to someone else," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "Said it wasn't about performance, just that they wanted a look that fit the story better." Hector's voice dropped, a hint of steel creeping in. "What look?" Melody didn't answer, her silence speaking volumes. She didn't need to. Catherine's lips tightened into a thin line, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truth, while Hector rose from the couch, his energy shifting as he began to pace the living room. That night, after Melody had retreated to the solace of her bedroom, Catherine sat across from Hector at the kitchen table, the weight of the day heavy in the air. "You know what this is," she said, her voice low and steady. "It's not about costumes. It's not about voice. It's about the fact that their idea of a princess doesn't have brown skin." Hector's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. "I'm not letting them do this to her," he vowed, his voice resonating with unwavering determination. "Not again." The next morning, he marched into the school office, dressed in his sharpest suit, his demeanor calm but resolute. The principal, a woman in her 50s with a practiced, brittle smile and years of experience deflecting conflict, welcomed him into her office with a measured politeness. "Mr. Adams, I understand you're upset." "No, I'm not upset," he replied, his voice even but firm. "I'm here because my daughter was unjustly removed from a role she rightfully earned. Not because she was unfit, but because you and your staff decided she doesn't look the part." "We made a creative decision," the principal countered, her tone defensive. "You made a discriminatory decision," he interrupted, his voice unwavering. "You taught her that excellence is meaningless if her face doesn't conform to your narrow definition of a fairy tale." The principal bristled, her composure momentarily cracking. "We are an inclusive school." "Then act like it," Hector declared, rising from his chair, his presence filling the room. "She will still perform. We'll host our own production, and you're welcome to attend." Catherine sprang into action that very afternoon, her determination matching Hector's. She borrowed chairs from the community center, printed flyers at the library, and enlisted Melody's friends to help with props and costumes. Hector, leveraging his professional network, secured a small theater downtown. Within days, their independent production of the play had a full cast, enthusiastic rehearsals, and a growing wave of interest rippling through the neighborhood. Word spread like wildfire. One of Hector's colleagues contacted a local news station. A reporter arrived during a dress rehearsal, the camera capturing Melody as she spun across the stage in a breathtaking gown Catherine had lovingly sewn by hand. Opening night arrived, the theater buzzing with an electric energy. Families filled the seats, their excited chatter and anticipation filling the air as the lights dimmed. Behind the curtain, Melody stood, her hands trembling ever so slightly, a mix of nervousness and excitement swirling within her. "You ready?" Catherine whispered, her voice filled with love and reassurance. Melody nodded, her eyes shining with newfound confidence. "I was born ready." As the curtain rose, Melody underwent a breathtaking transformation. Every line was delivered with unwavering clarity, every gesture imbued with grace and poise. She wasn't just playing a princess, she embodied one. The audience erupted in thunderous applause at the final bow, leaping to their feet in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, capturing the magic of the moment. As Melody stepped forward to acknowledge the outpouring of appreciation, a small figure appeared at the back of the crowd, the principal, her arms folded, her face unreadable. The next morning, the school issued a public apology, a letter sent to every parent, formally acknowledging Melody's original casting and admitting to an error born of bias. The school extended an invitation for Melody to speak at an assembly, but she declined. Instead, she returned to class, her head held high, her spirit unbroken. When asked by classmates if she would rejoin the drama club, she simply smiled. "Only if they've learned what royalty truly looks like," she replied. That evening, the family gathered in their now clutter-free living room, the remnants of their battle now a distant memory. Catherine was peacefully knitting, her fingers dancing across the needles. Hector was engrossed in a book, his brow furrowed in concentration. Melody, curled up on the floor with her sketch pad, was lost in her own creative world. "You know," she said thoughtfully, breaking the comfortable silence, "they thought I'd be too much, too different. But all I did was shine where they tried to dim me." Catherine nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "And you did it with grace, not noise. That's what made it so powerful." Hector added, "And with your own stage." Melody grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Next time, I want lighting effects like glitter explosions." Catherine groaned playfully. "No glitter in my house." Hector laughed, the sound warm and comforting. "We'll negotiate." As the night settled over their home, the shadow of injustice no longer weighed them down. It had been faced, named, and conquered, and in its place bloomed something far more beautiful, a memory, not of defeat, but of resilience, strength, and the unwavering power of creating a world where one's worth is never in question. It had been 10 years since Melody first sang on that train, 10 years since Hector Adams, the once buttoned-up CEO, first heard the voice that would irrevocably alter his carefully constructed world. Now, at 16, Melody Catherine Adams stood tall, her curls a little wilder, her wit a little sharper, but her heart still resonated with that same captivating song. She sat by her bedroom window that morning, a worn, leather-bound journal resting in her lap, its pages filled with memories, smelling faintly of lavender and ink. Each sentence was a carefully woven thread in the tapestry of a life reclaimed. "The first time I sang in front of Dad, I didn't know he was my dad," she read aloud, her voice soft but steady. "But I remember his eyes. They didn't just look at me. They recognized me like a melody he'd forgotten he knew." Downstairs, the tantalizing aroma of cinnamon pancakes wafted upwards, a beacon of warmth and togetherness. It was Sunday, which meant family breakfast, a cherished ritual where shoes were optional, and the music from the kitchen speaker engaged in a playful competition with the clatter of spoons. Caden Justice Adams, now 2 years old and full of opinions, was already enthroned in his high chair, launching spoonfuls of applesauce at imaginary dragons with a triumphant squeal. The name had been Melody's inspiration, Caden for the cadence of second chances, justice for everything they had fought to rebuild. She vividly remembered the night she had pitched it to them, standing in the living room, arms crossed, her eyes serious. "He's not just anyone," she had said. "He's proof we get to try again." She repeated the name aloud slowly, savoring each syllable. Caden Justice Adams. It echoed in the quiet room like a sacred vow. Hector, The man who once commanded boardrooms with clipped directives and meticulously scheduled calendars now stood at the stove in pajama pants, humming an old tune as he expertly flipped pancakes. He had intentionally stepped away from the corporate world not long after Melody's name was legally changed. The transition hadn't been sudden, but deliberate, like painstakingly relearning a beloved song in a new key. He still consulted, but only on his own terms. Most days, he answered to sticky fingers, backyard picnics, and impromptu late-night dance parties in the living room. Catherine entered through the back door, her cheeks flushed from a brisk morning walk, her arms laden with freshly cut garden roses wrapped in delicate paper. Her shop, Cord Flower, had opened a year ago in a charming corner lot near the park, a testament to her resilience and creativity. The name, Cord Flower, had been Melody's idea. Her meaning a chord is more than one note. Mama, it's what we are now. The shop had given Catherine something far more precious than just financial security. It had rekindled her passion for her craft, given her a space to breathe, and restored a sense of purpose. She gently set the flowers down on the counter, stole a quick kiss from Hector's cheek, and then poured herself a cup of coffee. They exchanged a knowing glance, a quiet, married look that conveyed 1,000 unspoken words. Melody, watching from the top of the stairs, grinned. "You guys are gross," she said teasingly, like a rom-com third-act kiss kind of way. Catherine raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eyes. Says the girl who sobbed uncontrollably through her own middle school play when the prince kissed the princess. Melody raised her hands in surrender. "Touché." She patted down the stairs, kissed Caden on the forehead, and then ducked playfully as he swung a spoon at her. "Dad," she said, taking a seat at the table. "Remember when you cried at your own wedding? I was embarrassed for all of us." Hector didn't look up from the pancakes. "That was pollen. It was allergy season." "Sure it was." Caden, oblivious to the witty banter, clapped his hands and shouted, "More." Later that afternoon, the entire family piled onto the front porch, their laughter echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Hector carefully wheeled out the old red wagon, its wooden frame creaking slightly with age, packed with sandwiches, juice boxes, and a soft, plaid blanket. "Picnic time," he called, raising one hand theatrically like a drum major leading a parade. Melody paused on the steps, her journal clutched in her hand, a thoughtful expression on her face. She had written one final entry that morning, not dramatic, but honest, filled with a quiet, healing warmth. "We're not the kind of family that looks perfect on paper, but we are music. We are rhythm, and we found our harmony." Catherine handed Caden his tiny sun hat and said, "You ready to steal the show, little man?" He giggled and pointed at Melody. "Melmy, traitor," she whispered mock-offended. Then she looked at her mother, who smiled back with that same quiet grace she always had. Her mother's eyes had witnessed pain, but they had also watched love return, step by step, note by note. They walked to the park together, just a few blocks away, their steps in sync. It wasn't a grand or opulent park, but it was theirs, a place of comfort and familiarity. Other families milled around, the sounds of community and children's laughter echoing through the warm, sun-drenched air. Catherine carefully spread the blanket on the grass. Hector opened the picnic basket, the aroma of freshly baked bread and homemade treats filling the air. Melody, lying on her back with her notebook in hand, gazed up at the clouds drifting lazily across the sky. "They look like treble clefs today," she mused, her voice soft. "No," Hector replied playfully. "That one looks exactly like your old drama teacher, the one who gave you the tree roll." Catherine laughed, the sound light and joyful. She hated talent. As the sun began to dip lower behind the trees, casting long shadows across the park, and Caden fell asleep in Catherine's lap, a half-eaten piece of bread still clutched in his small hand, Melody closed her notebook, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She no longer needed to write the story, she was living it. A family once fractured by silence now communicated in the language of hugs and glances, shared meals, and late-night lullabies. They weren't perfect, far from it, but they were present, their hearts open to each other, their love a constant, healing force. And sometimes, that presence, that unwavering connection, is the truest music of all. If you've journeyed this far with us, thank you. Truly, from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for staying with this story, for listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Stories like this one aren't always easy to tell. They require vulnerability and honesty. But maybe, somewhere along the way, you felt something stir within you, a flicker of recognition, a spark of hope. Maybe it reminded you of your own family, your own struggles, your own moments of quiet bravery. This isn't just a story about a father and daughter. It's a story about healing, about finding your voice, about the transformative power of love. It's a story about justice, not necessarily the kind served in courtrooms, but the kind that unfolds in kitchens and playgrounds, in shared meals and late-night whispers of forgiveness. It's a story about how love, even when broken, can learn how to sing again, its melody even more beautiful for the scars it carries. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you that we all belong somewhere, that there is a place for each of us in this world, even if we have to build that place ourselves, brick by brick, note by note. We'd love to know where you're watching from, what corner of the world you're tuning in from. Somewhere quiet, somewhere loud, somewhere in between wherever you are. We're deeply grateful you're here, sharing this moment with us. If this story touched you, even for a fleeting moment, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to our channel. Your support, no matter how small, helps us bring more stories like this to life, stories that hold on to truth, kindness, and the unwavering hope that tomorrow can be brighter, kinder, and more compassionate than yesterday. Your support means more than you know. Until next time, from our little corner of the world to yours, stay safe, stay kind to yourselves and others, and we'll see you in the next chapter. Join us in our mission to share meaningful stories that resonate with the heart, simply by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, so you can start each day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy, a reminder that we are all connected in this vast and beautiful world.